today, Morehouse, and also the Labor Research Action Network, Labor Research and Action Network's 11th Annual National Conference. So today we have a plenary on organizing in higher ed, job security and pay equity for all. We have a great panel here to talk about some different issues across the Southeast, and here in Georgia, but also across the country. And so my name is Alan Hyde. I'm in the School of History and Sociology at Georgia Tech, and I study cities and inequality, but I also help to organize a grad union with UAW at the University of Connecticut, and now I'm in the United Campus Workers of Georgia at Georgia Tech. And so this is an issue, I think it's probably been heightened given recent attacks on higher education, but also K through 12 in the last year or so. But that has a long legacy of organizing. And so today, what I'll do is we'll go around and let each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly. And we have a list of questions. And then in the last 15, 20 minutes, we'll give times for the audience to have a dialogue, because I think, this is something that many that are in higher education are going through right now. It's not done. It's a fight that's still going on. So we hope to have a good conversation with it. So we'll just kick it off and let the panelists introduce themselves.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Bryant Barnes. I am a PhD student in history at the University of Georgia and a proud member of the United Campus Workers of Georgia. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and pass it on and we'll talk a little bit more.
No? Yeah? Okay. Hi, I'm Kate Diedrich. I'm a senior strategic researcher at the Communications Workers of America, but I spend a lot of my time supporting our United Campus Worker locals and chapters across the Southeast.
Good afternoon. I'm Caitlin Guiley. I am Vice President of United Faculty of Florida. I teach at Pasco Hernando State College, north of Tampa, and happy to be here.
I'm Bruce Nissen, also with United Faculty of Florida. I chair our statewide contract enforcement committee and also on the statewide leadership body of the UFF, retired from Florida International University.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, LRAN. I'm Trent McDonald. I'm a third-gen Appalachian Unionist, an English PhD candidate at Washington University in St. Louis. We organize with the WashU Undergrad and Grad Workers Union and do a lot of research and organizing work with Higher Ed Labor United, or HELU.
Cool. Thank you so much. And thanks for the folks that are just coming in. I know it's a hot day and lunch was extra good. So we appreciate y'all coming. All right, so let's discuss a little bit about organizing across campuses. So for Georgia and Florida folks, you can talk about local political positions and challenges, but also wins and gains. There's a lot of different things we could talk about: hostile political environment, attacks on academic freedom, right to work issues, whatever y'all feel is best. So just talk about organizing across your campuses, and maybe we'll start. Caitlin, you want to start? All right.
Oh, I teach biology. Until 2016, I did not know that collective bargaining meant union negotiations. So there were some events at my campus, Pasco Hernando State College, that faculty were upset about. So we contacted United Faculty of Florida. We formed an organizing committee, and we won a union recognition campaign in 2018. So that's exciting. And so United Faculty of Florida is exciting because we're growing. So in the past 5 years, we've had 7 new union chapters within the state. And what has been working well is it's kind of gone in succession around the state, but because we had new union chapters, we had energized, trained, fresh leaders that could then coordinate with other campuses. So what is your contract language over here? What did you do when that happened? And so twice a year, we have our UFF Senate where representatives come together, and we have our bargaining councils. So the college bargaining councils come together and we talk about all of these issues. And so it's been very helpful for us because we can learn from each other. So that kind of coordination across campuses has really helped grow United Faculty of Florida. Florida is challenging. So our governor, Ron DeSantis, his mission is essentially to destroy public higher education in Florida. We've had major attacks on academic freedom. There was 3 professors at University of Florida who are going to testify against the state of Florida in a voter suppression case. And the University of Florida came to them and said they could not do that testimony because any action against the executive branch of Florida is not in the best interest of the University of Florida. Just egregious violation of academic freedom and free speech. So they filed a lawsuit. UFF had a press conference where we called for the president of UF called for donors to stop giving money to UF, to people, scholars stop coming to UF, and they, University of Florida did backtrack and they were able to testify. But it's just kind of one thing after another. It just came out that through a public records request that Ron DeSantis had a plan to take all of the hiring and firing decisions of university faculty away from the local institution and give them to the Board of Governors, which is appointed by the governor. So we're working on a Get Out the Vote campaign, get people registered and to the polls so that we can overthrow Ron DeSantis.
Trent, do you want to?
Hello? All right, great. Yeah, so Washington University in St. Louis is one of the most confusingly named institutions in this country, of course. It is an uber wealthy private institution. It's in the top 15 wealthiest universities by evaluation. And St. Louis is, of course, one of the poorest cities in the country with a poverty rate of about 1/5. It's a very racially stratified employer, of course, with a largely white faculty and graduate student workers, largely white undergraduate body, far from exclusively across all those categories, of course. And our clerical and service workers are largely from the Black working class of St. Louis. And so we, while primarily focusing on organizing undergrad and grad workers, do build relationships with as many campus workers as possible, librarians, faculty, but also our food service colleagues and our janitorial colleagues. And so my proudest moment as an organizer was managing to lift the campus-wide minimum wage from $12.50 to $15 an hour across a sort of 8-month campaign with lots of rallies and marches and sit-ins and civil disobedience arrests and things like that, which then moved our closely linked Barnes-Jewish Children's hospital system, which WashU is the second biggest employer, BJC is the biggest employer in the metropolitan region. They then moved their minimum wage from $10 an hour up to $15. And so that was for 4,700 workers, about 20 million a year. And it was about building disruptive capacity, right? That's what it's all about, of bringing as many workers and community members from the faith, from labor, from your neighbor, right, into the struggle. And so this is all done with social bargaining, right? Disruptive capacity. There was no collective bargaining agreement on the table being negotiated with this, writing notes to each other and passing them back and forth. We did this as a pre-majority union, right, across as many job titles as possible. And so coming out of that work, we wanted to build up more associational power, bring us to Higher Labor United, but we'll talk more about that later.
Bruce, do you want to take the next?
I thought my question was coming later, but
So the question is just talk about organizing on your campus.
oh,
But you
no,
can-
well, Caitlin laid it out very, very well. We're under tremendous attack. Ron DeSantis is one of the most horrible governors in the state. And we're going all out this fall to wipe him off the map. That's all I'll add.
Great. So now we'll move to Kate talking about larger Georgia campus.
Ooh, okay, yeah, and I'll talk a little bit because Bryant is here from the grad worker contingent of the United Campus Workers of Georgia. But I'll talk a little bit about some of the United Campus Workers, CWA, higher ed organizing across the Southeast. And so over the last 4 years, CWA has invested additional resources into organizing pre-majority unions in the South or in any state without formal public sector collective bargaining rights. Now we're in 10 states, Arizona, including Arizona and Colorado, across the Southeast, Georgia, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. So hard organizing terrain for sure. And all of these attacks are everywhere. Georgia recently gutted tenure, legislation gutting tenure. Looks like it's coming on the books in Louisiana. And then of course, constant attacks on all workers on campus, especially low wage, majority BIPOC workers. Our model is to organize industrial or wall-to-wall unions. So everyone from undergraduate student workers all the way up to faculty, including chairs. We have to build a solidarity unionism to fight back on these high-level attacks, but we also have to train up the rank and file workers across all those job categories to organize in a systematic way in their own job classification. And that's key, right? This is not a philanthropy model for faculty to support low wage workers. Their fight, any attack on any workers, attack on all workers. So that's the model. Essentially, we're building fighting unions in the most hostile territory. And we've gone from, in Georgia, for instance, over 4 years from, a few scrappy people at UGA who were mad about their paycheck issues with their paychecks to over 1,000 members statewide and continuing kind of to build. So issues range all the way from winning a few key 15 an hour campaigns. I mean, I know those were already coming and the pressure's there, but I think winning them with the force of workers demanding it on the shop floor is key. So we've won those at Tech and Georgia State, in part in Georgia because Kemp gave everyone a $5,000 raise. Strange times. But they're up now to 15 at Georgia Tech and Georgia State. And then so 15 an hour campaigns. We won one in Memphis for low wage workers on campuses at the University of Memphis. And now some of our faculty are joining a faculty defense network to fight back against attacks on tenure. So those are just some of the sort of broader Southern public higher ed fights.
So yeah, I won't add too much more to that. So I think one of the interesting things, and maybe this is just kind of my naturally optimistic kind of personality, is that I think Georgia is, the political situation in Georgia is very tricky at times. Obviously, it's a lot of hurdles, but I think we're seeing a lot of movement. I think CWA saw a lot of this kind of bubbling resentment about the status quo, and that's why they're kind of really making this push and supporting us as we're kind of still getting our legs under us. But also the fact that Georgia is kind of going purple, possibly blue, has, I think, really helped us in some ways, but we've had to be very flexible, kind of knowing what the very entrenched kind of barriers are, given the fact that we have essentially no worker protections or rights. That's forced us to kind of go after this wall-to-wall model, building solidarity across different job categories, because at the moment, because there is such fear of retaliation and the fact that retaliation for the most part can go unpunished or unrectified, it really requires folks having each other's backs, even if the particular issue or campaign that we're working on at the moment isn't personally relevant to one campus worker. But the fact that Georgia is kind of in this weird purplish kind of situation, I think has created additional problems, but also opened new doors. So one is Kemp in particular is kind of shitting his pants with 2022, or with November coming up. And it's his attempts prior to the fact that the recent kind of election results where the Trump candidates have been beaten. I think he was kind of trying to walk this line between trying to kind of regain some of that affection that he had lost from Papa Trump after he refused to kind of throw the election in 2020. But he's scared from the attacks on the left. So that's where we get this $5,000 bonus for state employees. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. We also had a huge win with a student fee where the initial campaign was kind of targeting first off for graduate students, getting that fee removed for graduate workers. And we got it removed all the way. So that's kind of a big step towards fair and kind of adequate funding for higher education in Georgia. But the attempts that Kemp has made to kind of win back the graces of some of the Trump folks has put Sonny Perdue in the top kind of leadership position for our university system in the state, who has made it very vocal that his kind of plan is to bring more conservative values back to higher education. Yeah, I'll go ahead and stop there.
Cool. Sounds great. Well, thank y'all. So now perhaps Bruce, can you talk to us a little bit about, and this might be of interest to many of the folks around here, many of the states represented here, especially on this panel, but also throughout. Can you talk a little bit about how can a higher education union thrive in a right to work environment?
Yeah, this is a question that very much was in the center of my mind and of Candy Churchill, who's executive director of United Faculty of Florida. She was an organizer hired back in 2001, one of the best organizers I've ever known and a very close friend. She and I were trying to think post Janus, every public sector union in the United States is really right to work conditions, basically. So the thought was, how do and what are the factors that make for success or failure under right to work circumstances? And we thought we had, and we know we do have in the United Faculty of Florida, an example of how you can grow and thrive and become a very vibrant union in a right to work state in a hostile political environment and keep growing and keep becoming more and more powerful and a more effective and well-functioning union. So we looked at the history of the UFF from basically, I moved to Florida in 1997. So basically from the point in which I moved to and joined the United Faculty of Florida up until the present time, just to look at a number of things and tried to not do some self-puffery and pat yourself in the back and how wonderful you are, but actually look at really hard numbers to see how well we really were doing. And all the hard numbers back up our own self-assessment of how successful we are being. Our density has well more than doubled in that 20 some years since I came. In fact, as Caitlin said, we've both in terms of organizing externally, in other words, organizing the unorganized, but also internal organizing now because we have a new culture inside of our union, an organizing culture, growing the density inside our existing units, and kind of also, we have more than doubled, well more than doubled the size of our union in the last 7 years also. Now I think that's pretty rare. I could be wrong, but I think that's pretty rare and right to work circumstances in a hostile political environment with one of the most, in DeSantis, I think we've got one of the most, if not the most anti-union governor and legislature that's under his thumb will do anything that he asks them to do for a union to thrive that well. And before that, we had Jeb Bush and we've had Rick Scott. I mean, we've had we've had one bad governor after another. I won't use the language I was going to use. We've had very bad governors and very hostile environments and never had anything even close to a friendly legislature. How can a union thrive under circumstances like that? Now, the UFF has done so. So we did a very fine granular analysis of what was happening. And it's a variety of factors. And I certainly don't have the time to go into it all right now. Let me just say one quick thing. Anybody that wants to read the entire article, because most of these articles, after you publish them, they're behind a paywall and all sorts of other nonsense. If you want a copy, just email me. And my email is really easy. Bruce Nissen, my name, @gmail.com. My name, Bruce Nissen @gmail.com. Be happy to send you the article, the whole article. But it's a combination of factors that make for success. And sad to say, frankly, that one of the most important factors was crisis. Jeb Bush thought he had destroyed our union in 2001 when he abolished our employer, set up separate employers on each individual campus with his buddies, who all said, you now have no union, you're non-unionized, it's gone, your union is gone. That was a crisis. Forced us to go back and act like a real union, not act like a bargaining, like a servicing bureaucracy, but to go out and talk to all of the members or non-members, go out and talk to the bargaining unit, all of them. And within a little over 2 months, we had signed up between 61 and 97% of the people on every single campus in our bargaining units, on every single campus. That was the one crisis. Now, the normal thing that would have happened, given the culture of our union at that time, was we would have had that high point, and then we would have started atrophying and going down in membership and interest and on and on and on. But because we had gone back, and because a number of us saw what was needed to be done, we began to build networks inside the union, both within the staff, Candy to the extent she could inside the staff. And we had some of the good old boys on the staff, so it wasn't that easy. And myself and a number of others across the various campuses began to try to build a network of understanding the organizing orientation that you had to have under these circumstances and to build a strong organizing presence. Now, this did not happen overnight. I'm talking, it was well over a decade before things turned around, but they did turn around with constant effort and pressure to do so, changing the culture from one of being a servicing bureaucracy into an organizing dynamo. That was the key. And those of us who self-consciously understood that kept building that. And we kept, as we won new units in various times, picking up individuals who understood this and who became key leaders inside our union, such as Caitlin and others. That was one. And then the second one came about. And so after that, instead of going down in density, we actually just gained a little bit, but mostly stayed steady. And then the next crisis came, which was 2009, 2010, where the Florida legislature said, any public sector union now that does not have 50% or more of its bargaining units signed up is automatically decertified and you're non-union. At that point, the UFF was forced to go back and do, we were better at that point already, but was forced to really go back, especially on our weak chapters, such as Florida State University, such as University of Florida, a couple biggest ones, the weakest ones. We were forced to go out and talk to everybody. And we told them, look, you have to sign up and you have to join this union or it's all gone. And think about it. If it's all gone, do you want to work in a situation where this union is completely gone? And in some chapters, weak chapter like Florida State University, within 1 year, we more than doubled the membership. And the other ones, the University of Florida went up enormously and stuff like that too. But it's important to understand, just because people got scared into the union doesn't mean they're going to stay there. It doesn't mean they have a union understanding. It doesn't mean anything unless you have the culture in your union to continually stay in touch with them, involve them, pull them in, and make them part of the working, functioning union, rather than, again, a servicing mechanism basically to help them out. By this point in time, by pushing that very, very, very strongly, we began to develop that. After the second crisis, it was a huge jump in our membership at that point. At that point, our membership kept going up and up and up and up and up. And since then, it's continued to go up every single time, because it's like what is it called when you have a downward spiral, it keeps feeding into itself? A vicious circle. The opposite of a vicious, the opposite of a vicious circle is a synchronous circle going upward. And what we began to develop, both in terms of staff and in terms of our membership and of our chapters and our leadership, and developing our leadership, self-consciously thinking of ourselves as that, and beginning to organize externally, which we had not been doing prior to 2010, really, and picking up new units and picking up fresh blood of the kind that Caitlin's talking about and stuff. We have been growing and growing and thriving. And every single year we get bigger. Every single year we get stronger. Every single year we become much more of a multifaceted union. In the old days, again, if you think of a union as a triangle, right? One side is bargaining and enforcing a contract. That's all we did in the old days. It's all we did, and thought that made for a good union. The bottom, usually I think of the bottom as building up membership and recruiting new members, building up the membership and internally organizing your membership. And that one we didn't do anything on. And then the third, if you think the third part of the triangle is the political and community, both reaching out into the community, which some of our better chapters do, and definitely developing a political machine, developing political power. which now most all of our chapters, not all of them, we've still got some weak ones and some bad ones, but in general, most of them have developed that in a very, very strong way too. We're now a multifaceted union. And then if you think of in the center of that triangle, kind of internal capacity and leadership and developing leadership in the rest. We've got all those things humming at the same time, every single one of them at the UFF. And I have to say, the UFF of all, I've been a labor educator since 1981, all my life. And I would say of all the unions I've ever been involved with, and in fact, most of the unions I've ever even seen, at this point, I think the UFF is one of the most democratic unions, one of the most involving unions. And I'm just so incredibly proud to be part of the United Faculty of Florida. It's a real success story under difficult circumstances. In the article, we drew up 7 lessons that we think you can learn out of all this and stuff like that. I'm not going to get on to them because I know I talked too long already, so I'm going to shut up.
All right. Thank you so much, Bruce. So now, Trent, maybe in about 3 to 5 minutes, can you speak for a moment about the need for coordinated organizing across all of higher education, especially the ways higher ed workers across campuses in the US can support other organizing efforts? You know, we're all in this together, even though we may have a union at our university, other places still need help.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just paint the brief sort of higher ed labor landscape, right? And so there are about 5 million higher ed workers across all job titles in the US today. A little under 1 million are unionized. And so for the easy math people, about 20%, as many of you know, about 10% of workers are unionized, formal union members. In this day and age, as Smiley's work points out, there's a lot that isn't revealed by the statistics, right? And so we have great inspirational work done by folks like United Campus Workers and UFF to say, we need to be building statewide power, right? And just because you have one specific local campus fight, that doesn't mean that you're the only one suffering it, as I'm sure many of us have felt in organizing conversations or attending rallies and things, right? And so we already do the kind of coordinated like local organizing whenever you have a workplace that has a union drive, right? One person is not a union, right? 2 people are not a union usually, right? You have to be reaching outward and bringing lots of new folks in. But in higher ed, we have 13 national unions that have that 900,000 and some change, a little under 1 million members. We do have enormous union growth, about 84,000 new union represented workers since 2012, which is much higher than pretty much any other sector, with grads being the biggest sort of jump, the biggest shock. All of those grad campaigns, to my knowledge, were won by bringing in other grad unionists in this era of great Zooming that we all live in, right? Because people just need to know that you can fight, you can win, we did it, we can too. There's nothing fancy about it. As Ashley and Smile were talking about a lot last night, it is finger painting, it is not rocket science, right? Nevertheless, even if with all these new union members and wonderful strikes and strong contracts and wins against, sexual harassment and racism on campuses, as well as for wages and benefits and all that wonderful stuff, we still have a 75% of university instruction being taught by contingent faculty, people without any meaningful job security, usually on even a semester by semester basis. Can you imagine if K through 12 education was 75% by substitute teachers? That's what the landscape of higher ed teaching is right now. And so even with the amazing, extraordinary, wonderful union work that's happening, it is not enough to address the scale of that crisis. Because 1, there's still 80% non-organized. And 2, even in highly unionized labor markets like New York or LA or Seattle or what have you, Chicago, there's not one single campus where wages, job security, and benefits have been taken out of competition, right? American capitalism is about divide and conquer, race to the bottom, sell low, buy high, buy low, sell high, flip that around. Unless and until we work to take wages out of competition and job security, administrators will keep wielding that axe as strongly as they have been over the last 40 years. And so lots of wonderful folks, many UCW and UFF folks among them, but also in New York and LA, Seattle, Chicago, whatever, came together to say, we need to be organizing industrially like they did in the old days. That the UAW, United Auto Workers, United Steelworkers, United Electrical Workers, United Packing House Workers, the Teamsters, when they realized, hey, Unless we unionize everybody within a given geography, a given city in a specific sector, wages will always be in competition. They will always be in competition. And so with highly fragmented organizing and highly fragmented bargaining, that's the core reason we haven't been able to get ahead. We've been able to make wonderful improvements, but we have to consolidate our organizing and our bargaining and our strikes, including where strikes are unfortunately illegal. If we make them big enough, they cannot fire everyone. Universities can't be moved in the same way that auto plants can be, right? We are economic engines in a lot of our cities, and we have to organize and build militant, large-scale disruptive capacity to work to address the scale of the crisis that we now have in higher ed employment.
Great. So along those lines, higher education labor market is very stratified. We tend to focus a lot on faculty, maybe tenure track faculty, but there are many more, not just contingent faculty, but the staff, graduate students, undergrads. Kate and Bryant, can you tell us a little bit about the importance of staff organizing and wall type organizing that United Campus Workers does?
Yeah, so I mean, staff are literally the backbone of our universities. They make sure the buildings are running, they make sure the buildings are clean, and they feed students at the dining halls. They're grossly underpaid, and for the most part, especially at UGA, heavily or disproportionately Black and brown women in general. And then they are often, when we have what administrators like to call finding efficiencies, they are the efficiencies that are found, meaning they're the first to be let go. After 2020, we did a job loss report and found what pretty much we expected would be the case, but we just had the numbers to back it up, that Black and brown employees, but in particular Black and brown women, were the most negatively impacted by budget cuts in the university system of Georgia, which were ultimately less than what they had initially been, the budget cuts. However, the jobs were not really given back. So it's even though they overshot in making cuts, they just said, "Hey, let's just keep it here." So but that's also part of I think the big importance about organizing staff is the folks at basically the bottom of the proverbial totem pole kind of set the standard. It's as long as the folks who are doing the most essential work and being paid the least, being supported the least in various ways, as long as they continue to be in that position, then it's going to work its way back up. And we're seeing that now with the attack on tenure. We have a lot of folks who were pretty quiet over the last several decades, and then suddenly they're very scared because their jobs are now at risk of becoming just as precarious as the low-wage staff. So I think it's crucial that we that we organize there, but as part of this larger wall-to-wall campaign that says an attack, as Kate said, an attack on one is an attack on all. Sometimes it might take a few decades for it to work its way up, but once it works its way up, you're kind of trying to shut the door after all the horses are out. So I think that's crucial. And then, what was the other part of the question?
I think you got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's basically you have to kind of build from the bottom. Staff are the largest kind of body of campus workers, and often working in the most sometimes unsafe or unhealthy work environments. And by healthy, I mean at the greatest risk of retaliation without real kind of recourse for justice.
I'll just add really quickly, I think to Trent's point, to back it up even more. I mean, United Campus Workers has to organize in this model because we're in such hostile work conditions. We all have to be in the same big union, big industrial union to fight administration and the state. But in many ways, it's better. And we all should, in higher ed and in labor in general, we all should be trying to look at our employers and say, let's not let them pit us into tiny little units that then they bargain with separately and use one another, each of us to kind of, win out in the end. So I do think like looking to Rutgers, looking to a model that's, thinking about sectoral or industry-wide organizing, we have to think of this as the future. And even in states where we have UCW unions, and we've started out as an industrial union where a faculty member is sitting there with the custodian and the undergrad worker from the dining hall, and they're saying, oh, what's our first campaign of the union going to be? And coming together to bring in their own issues, fight their own fights, but then bring them together in a solidarity model. I hope that we can, even in states where we get a carve out of bargaining, we can fight for a larger scope of bargaining, right? Because it shouldn't be over just wages and working conditions. This is the public good, private or public. This is a public good. It's ours. It's our students. And we need a huge scope of bargaining. And we need to either line up our bargaining calendars or all join HELU and have one big industrial fight. At the very least, at our campus unions, I hope that we can have more expansive definitions defined by workers of who's in the bargaining unit. And we can fight for that in higher ed unions anywhere right now. Let's make sure, as CUNY does, as Rutgers does, as others have tried to do. I know it's hard. It's going to be hard. We are socialized into being pitted against one another all the time over scarce resources. But if we don't kind of think, just like in Florida, this is a model that's come out of a crisis, but it might be one that we think, oh, wow, what are we going to take from this when we build, when we govern ourselves, as we heard yesterday. So just a little bit more about, I think that the industrial model is the model. It's all workers. A university system in some ways is an interesting space of working class people all together, from all the way from custodians through faculty. We have to organize people whose class interests have been historically divided for forever. And higher ed itself is, yielded as a tool often of the ruling class to divide and conquer. So I think the more we can organize across all worker groups on campuses or at any of our employers across sectors and industries, the more powerful we'll be.
So we got about 8 minutes left before the Q&A. So briefly, maybe Trent or Bryant, talk about the experience of grad students and the challenges that they face. We'll focus on grad students, and undergrads maybe can come in the Q&A if y'all have questions about undergrads.
Yeah, I'll be super brief, right? That grads are federally defined as a 20-hour per week job and have historically been carved out of collective bargaining in most states in the public sector. And the National Labor Relations Board in the private sector has usually said you're a student, not an employee, so you're carved out of collective bargaining protections. And so instead of just saying, oh, well, I guess we can't do anything, people built disruptive capacity. People organized, had strikes, moved legislators and local political elites and national political elites to eventually shift that landscape. What other things do grads organize around is, power differentials at work are so stark and severe for academic advisors. Sexual harassment has been endemic, particularly in science, technology, engineering, and math STEM, but also in like anthropology, and Harvard has been getting a lot of local coverage. And my dear friends at the Harvard Grad Students Union have been, doing pioneering work of how do you use legal strategies, workplace action, media campaigns to work to shift the narrative that just because you have tenure and a lot of people have read your books doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want anymore, that there are going to be real repercussions. Finally, most wages are quite bad and a lot of places don't have good health insurance. So grads are similar to other workers in the modern US economy in that regard.
And I'll just add one more thing, graduate students and undergrads, there's a lot of churn in the labor market, right? Because you're only in a program for so long. So trying to create that sustained energy, you got to constantly recruit, you got to constantly re-energize that group. So, and just so we can keep on time, the next question is, Caitlin and Trent, you've been a part of HELU, or Higher Education and Labor United, from the beginning. Can you briefly talk about that and maybe directions for the future?
Sure. So HELU is Higher Education Labor United. Our kind of tagline is wall to wall, coast to coast. So we want to bring together all of our parent unions, the 13 national parent unions, all worker classifications, from our custodial staff to our tenured professors across all the states, bargaining and non-bargaining, to achieve a new vision for higher education in our country. There's huge, decades-long national trends to undermine our system of public higher education. Our opposition is organized. They have ALEC, they have all these other, machines that are nationwide that are trying to undermine us. And we're not nationally organized. And we need to be if we want to have this public good for our country. And so we're building a coalition across unions across the country, higheredlaborunited.org. And I'm very excited about it. I feel, honestly, it helps me sleep at night. So I'm very proud to be part of United Faculty of Florida, but we're very faculty oriented, and we're not class conscious at all. We don't have our adjuncts in our units. We kind of almost consciously decided not to have our, we're not organizing the adjuncts. At my campus, the full-time faculty are organized, but our staff and our adjuncts are not. And our custodial and groundskeepers are contracted out. And I brought this up with our financial officer and said, well, we save a lot of money. At what cost? So I think it's just very exciting to work to build this power, because I think that's ultimately what we need. And just pitting higher ed faculty against adjuncts and adjuncts against staff is not getting us anywhere. I've even had, being an adjunct is very difficult. I was an adjunct before I was full-time faculty, and a week before classes started when I was in North Carolina, I lost half my income. Not that, there's nothing I could do. So I think a lot of full-time faculty, myself included, when you get hired as full-time, you're like, oh, I don't have to deal with being an adjunct anymore. And you just don't even want to relive the trauma of how difficult it is to be a contingent faculty member. And so I think HELU is making a lot of good efforts to kind of bridge those divides and bring everyone together.
All right, so to wrap us up before we go to the audience Q&A, because we can go to 2:15, I think, right? Is that okay? Okay, sure. All right. So can we talk a little bit about the importance of this moment for higher education? We just came out of COVID, a lot of movement around racial justice, gender and other types of justice, sexual orientation justice. So we're also moving into another tumultuous time of midterm elections, possible recession on the horizon. Can you talk about the importance of this moment, maybe in a few sentences each? Maybe we'll start with Bryant and go across. And a little bit maybe about hope, right? So I think one of the things from Ash's and Erica's keynote yesterday was really got me a little bit more hopeful. It's easy to be depressed right now. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I think, I think my natural kind of personality is optimistic, although the last few years, it's become a little bit more optimism by will rather than nature. But I think as I'm talking with folks and as I'm seeing the students in my classrooms, I'm very optimistic because it's so clear how close we are to kind of I think a breaking point. And it's up to us really to kind of just grind and try to organize and say, this is a crisis. And the right has been very good at turning crisis into opportunity. Left, not so much. So this is our turn to really kind of take this crisis and kind of shape the world for ourselves. I think higher ed is in many ways a privileged position to be in. So it's definitely not easy. But I think as far as the example that we can set, especially as the larger economy is becoming increasingly kind of service-based, very spread out in terms of where workers are. I mean, UCWGA, we're trying to organize folks across the state. So it's kind of really showing that not only are they trying to pit us against each other on our campuses, they're trying to pit campus against another campus. They're trying to pit students at one campus against another, or students at another campus. So if we can really kind of exploit this opportunity that we have, because we might be rightly nervous and scared, but you can look at the news and you can look at the amount of money that corporations and stuff are putting into union busting campaigns, stuff like that. They are also shitting their pants. So let's just keep the pressure on. We have to be just more persistent than they are. And I think we have a pretty good opportunity to do that on college campuses. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful. Yes, that we are going to be in another fighting wave, especially in higher ed. The so-called demographic cliff is being held over our heads by management right now, along with the recession. So I think we're looking into another wave of austerity threats, but often these crises are manufactured on their end, and we have to fight back. But I think, I mean, if you look around, if we think about the grad workers in the private sector who have been fighting outside the law and showing that if you use systematic organizing methods, same in Florida and in Georgia, workers can build pre-majority all the way up to the power of majority and win on the shop floor and keep fighting. And we look around us at these fights at Starbucks and Amazon and everywhere else. I do think people are fed up and ready to organize and ready to learn the methods and use discipline to build worker organizations. So I think just seeing our members, Shelley here and from Kentucky, we have a new union in Kentucky, and it's growing, you know, by the hundreds every couple of months, with workers coming to learn how to have structured organizing conversations, how to chart their workplaces, how to do leader ID. And I think that we have to find our hope in the work, that it will continue to kind of build our power even in hard times.
So COVID has obviously been very difficult. I think a lot of people are tired, but it's kind of an opportunity because people have become more accustomed to using Zoom. So now we're learning, faculty are learning about what's happening in California, you know, in Florida. Like it's bringing across a kind of national ability to communicate better. So I know even at my college, we have 5 campuses in 2 counties. And since we started using Zoom, we have a lot more people come to meetings because they just log on. And so even though COVID has been hard for us, it's also kind of a crisis point. And I think just having the technology of Zoom to have weekly meetings with people in 5 different time zones has allowed us to get to that level of organization where we can really fight back and learn from each other and find out what's going on and get agitated, learn techniques. And so I think a lot of it is really the technology that's going to help us out, in addition to, you know, basic one-on-one organizing conversations and union tactics. I think it's brought us together in a way it hasn't happened before.
I just want to say, if you study labor history at all, if you know labor history, you know that labor usually doesn't grow in small little increments, right? It grows in upsurges. If you look at the labor history, there's been upsurges, 1890s, 1930s, et cetera. That's when labor really makes qualitative, massive and quantitative massive changes. And the other thing that's interesting is all the labor experts in the world never can predict these things. We're always wrong. We think we know it all and stuff, but we don't necessarily. I don't know that we can get a handle on exactly when we're on the verge of an upsurge or we're not. Because like 1929, 1930, 31, the labor experts were predicting the death of organized labor, and look what happened in the 1930s. To me, the question is, are we on the verge of another upsurge? That's the real question. And I'm just as dumb as anybody else. I do not know. I have no idea. But there's certainly promising indications that we might be. And I really, really hope that we are. And I think that we very well might be, but who knows? Whether we are or we're not, our task is to keep organizing, fan the flames, organize, fan the flames, build as broadly, widely, and as class conscious a manner as possible. And if the upsurge comes, fantastic. If it doesn't, we're still doing the right thing when we're trying to do that. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that was a great setup for me, Bruce. I think we are in an upsurge. It's a matter of how big of one and how long of one, right? And that, to my mind, the particular task that I plan to work on, and I invite everybody else to, is to coordinate and consolidate and help as many of the workers that are so eager to fight back and organize and win, particularly in higher ed. Again, that's just what I know best. But whenever a Starbucks worker makes a solidarity ask, we have to answer, right? And so for Helu in particular, we have of that about 1 million union members in higher ed, union contracts covering like 285,000 that are being bargained in 2022 to 2023 academic year. Some are already finished, maybe about 40 to 50K of those workers. But never before has there been any real coordinating capacity of job demands, job security demands, wage demands, benefit demands, and then coordinated action. And so again, if we intervene in very specific labor markets like New York or Chicago or LA, when we set a new floor, we also set a new ceiling. And so it's all about you in the audience on Zoom, reaching out to as many people as you know to bring them into the struggle. We only have 3 real strengths as like progressive forces. We don't have money, we don't have decision-making power. We have some, but not as much as the other guys, right? And it's usually guys. We have the fact that we're right, and it's good to fight for good things. Doesn't get you very far, but still, it's a good feeling. We have the ability to research to find out where are weak points, that when we pressure, we're more likely to get what we want. But most importantly, strength in numbers, right? We have to bring as many people into the fight as possible. And when we get those 3 workings, that's when we win.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And so now we'll move to the audience Q&A. Does anybody have any questions that y'all would like to discuss? Yes, all the way in the back.
Yeah, wonderful question. My first organizing ever was for $15 an hour and also winning better protections for international graduate student workers on campus. And so legally, you know, the law is the same. It doesn't matter your citizenship status, visa status. Socially, by far, you know, the amount of risks that international folks face on visas. In University of Missouri, Kansas City, there was recently a case of, you know, a modern day slave labor of an Indian professor using his Indian grad students that he would specifically recruit and ask to work 90-hour weeks. And the only reason that stopped is because the Indian grads were willing to fight back with support of other workers on campus. This was not done with the union. This was purely social work, worker to worker, friend to friend organizing. And so it's absolutely elemental to bring as many international student workers and immigrant workers to the table as possible. But of course, being mindful of the risks and saying, we are going to be the ones as domestic folks to stick our necks out the furthest, but we do need you in the struggle.
Any other feedback on that particular question?
I'll just quickly say it's with our Graduate Assistants United chapters where this has come up the most. It's a real struggle. And it's got to be a key thing with those areas where the foreign, in the case of graduate assistants, graduate workers are. And we're working really hard to build that in. We get very differential responses, I think. Some of the key militants inside our Graduate Assistants United are from other countries. And some of the most scared and won't touch you and won't even talk to you are from other countries and stuff. So it's a crucial front of the struggle. Among the full-timers I know from my organizing work inside among the full-timers, our most difficult places have often been engineering schools, some business schools too, of course, but the engineering schools, which are often filled with people from East Asia or South Asia. And I could talk, I'm not going to, I'll take too long of a time to talk out all the things we've discovered kind of and trying to work with that sector. But again, it's a key area to be working in, particularly in the tougher to crack areas like the engineering school.
Could I add one quick footnote? Some of the best unionists at Washington University are international folks from countries where there is no labor law. There are no labor rights. And so one of my dearest friends, his name is Santiago Rosa Sanchez, who's from Colombia, which has the highest murder rate of unionists in the world, right? And so when we were saying we need to support the local struggle for Black lives against the most violent police force in the US in St. Louis, he was out there leading marches, right? Willing to risk his deportation because he believes an injured one is an injured all. And he often offers like, we need to be very careful when organizing international folks because they're so worried. And I said, yeah, but I mean, they get unions way better than a lot of white Americans. He said, yeah, I get it. Other countries have class consciousness, right? This isn't just you as an American. We believe this, we live this. And so we have a lot to learn from them.
Just add one quick thing. Trent earlier mentioned that grad student workers are capped at 20 hours a week. So domestic grad students sometimes supplement very poor stipends by getting jobs as servers or bartenders or something like that off campus. For the most part, due to visa restrictions and everything like that, international grad students are not able to do that. So not only are they kind of facing just the sometimes poverty level wages, they are prevented. So it's kind of, again, it's like the ones who have the least rights are sometimes the most kind of engaged or militant, but also they're the most at risk on every level in some cases. So it's kind of very important to really try to bring them in.
And so I'll need to repeat the question for the Zoom folks, and then y'all can go ahead and answer. So next question. Any other questions from the audience? Yes. So really quickly, the question is about HELU and their national strategy.
Yeah, so HELU, maybe their kind of vision and platform. We have 3 program areas: coordinated organizing, which is kind of what we've been talking about, learning from each other, timing demands, and for contracts together, matching up people who are more experienced with people who are learning about how to organize and how to win contract campaigns. So that's coordinated organizing. Then we have political advocacy, which would be lobbying at the state, local, federal level, working with politicians to get better legislation passed. And then policy development, which is kind of like the ALEC for higher ed. So instead of waiting for our lawmakers to write good policies and pass them, the kind of hope for our policy development is to write those Department of Labor policies, write the Department of Education policies or bills for states and the federal level so that we do the work for them. It's more likely to happen, right? So like some ideas would be to make Department of Education funding contingent on labor rights in that state. So those are kind of some of the strategies that we're thinking about. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Just real quick, and please ask the other panelists more questions. Sorry, I've been hogging the mic. Just to say that nationally, right, we're a super minority membership in each of those unions, UAW, SEIU, AFT, NEA, et cetera. And so there is no national sort of, unified struggle. And so we do most of our organizing at the local level, since that is where most members are most engaged, right? And so in some ways, it's like, don't worry about your union affiliation, whatever it is, great. We need you at the table. We need you in our fight to save public higher education, because otherwise it's the two great for mobility are labor unions and education. And if both are under attack and non-existent, then that means very difficult to know upward mobility for anyone anymore.
Great. So I believe the question, there was another question right behind. Yes. All right, so the question is about undergraduate organizing and some strategies to effectively do that.
I mean, we have more undergrad unions than ever before in US history that are recognized in our bargaining contracts. UMass Amherst, Grinnell, Dartmouth, Kenyon should be having an election soon. And a lot of these are really big, like hundreds of workers. And a lot of the grad unions have undergrad members too, University of California, Columbia, Harvard, et cetera. And so the issue is, I think, only organizing undergrads is too hard because of the high turnover, but you need to unionize a university campus, a college campus. And so if you include them, they want to fight, they want to organize, and they'll be in the labor force for 50, 60 years. Unfortunately, retiring is difficult, but it's so incredibly important to organize undergrads, and they really want to organize right now. There's a lot of other drives going on, particularly in like Oregon.
Any other comments?
Can I just throw in one thing here? I think this is also seeding the labor movement, because I don't know about the end. I'm a Grinnell graduate, very proud of Grinnell College, gone 100% union, all the workers there, almost all the students there are workers, and the college has now recognized the undergrad student union. But our Graduate Assistants United at UFF has seeded much of the staff people all over, some of the best staff people all over the labor movement in various kinds of places, including our own, came out of our Graduate Assistants United. So I think it is so critical when people are at the undergrad level or the grad level to get introduced to unionism and to run through it, because the talents they can bring out into the labor movement is unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. I think folks are pretty familiar with the high turnover. One other difficulty that we've found talking with some undergrad workers is a lot of undergrad workers are working as dorm advisors, RAs, stuff like that. So not only are they at risk of losing their meager incomes, sometimes they're at risk of losing their housing. That's some students are working in campus housing so they can afford to actually go to college. But I think one other thing is even if it's not undergraduate workers, and maybe this is kind of getting at some of the other comments, is just having unionized universities, college campuses, makes an impact, even if folks aren't necessarily getting trained in the actual organizing, being members of the union if they're not workers. We've had rallies and protests and stuff like that where undergrads are continuously thanking us because they felt that administrators were ignoring them, especially with COVID. Undergrads did not want to be in classrooms, especially in Georgia, where there was where masks were strongly encouraged, and you could not enforce mask wearing or anything like that. And basically what students were telling us was exactly the opposite of what administrators were saying. Administrators were saying students are demanding this. And then finally, one of the other things is students are, at the end of the day, the dollar source of higher education, especially as it's being further cut from state budgets. So it's make the money talk, basically. So going after, or at least supporting undergraduates in some way, even if they are difficult to organize, kind of keeping in mind undergraduate interests is crucial.
All right. Well, I think we have, with that, we have run out of time for today, but could we get a round of applause for our panelists? And yeah, I think I encourage y'all, we have, I think, a little bit of time till the next session. So if y'all want to have a conversation in the hallway, but before we go, maybe the panelists, y'all can step down if you would like. We are going to announce the winners of our LRAN Worker Revival competition. So let them get a chance to step down. All right, how many people voted? I'm kind of curious. Okay, a good bit of people voted. We had some good entries for this competition. So our winner, kind of a drum roll for, what should I start with? Should I start, which one? The classic. All right, so we're gonna start with the classic. So the best take on a classic is Nichelle Dunlap. And Anita Matthias. So can we get a round of applause? I believe we can show that one here. I think this is correct. Yes, this one.
I ain't gonna let this system turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let this system turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking until these words are said. Then I listen how gives me no power, gives me no power, gives me no power. Then I listen how gives me no power. I came by gas, I came by food. I wonder what it'd be to do. Every day and every night, we working so hard. We're working so hard. We're working so hard. Every day and every night, we're working so hard. We're underpaid, healthcare delayed. We're just waiting for better days. I ain't gonna let this system turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. I ain't gonna let this system turn me around. We're gonna keep on working and keep on talking until we work the stay.
All right, so congratulations, Nichelle. And so this competition, each of the different winners get a particular prize. So congrats again. And I think there were 33 entries overall. And so this was we saw quite a bit. As judges, we saw quite a bit of great entries. So we really want to congratulate Nichelle and Anita. All right. So our next winner is the Labor Song of the Future. And maybe one more drum roll if y'all want to. So our winner is Work by Lingua Franca. Are they here today? No, I can't remember if they're here, but we will show this video as well, I believe.
How long are we gonna stay out?
The people now have the power and they're using it.
The United Campus Workers of Georgia are here fighting for fair wages, fair raises, and for fair funding.
October, let's go.
Communication Workers of America, United Campus Workers of Georgia, 3265, bitch. Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Workers ship the boxes, they swiffer and they mop and look chipper whenever talking and whipping the shopping carts. They pack the beer in the walk-ins and stack the weird little boxes. Keep our kitchen fridges stocked and the financial markets open. They clocking for a 50 bucks and bear the coffin of like 60 thrifty chuds and get spit on like sitting ducks. So they are sick of getting fucked. So you ever wanted to honor them? Here's my ask for all my hominids. Collective bargaining, Amazon and Target and FedEx and Walmart and Instacart and Whole Foods till we all get what we are to get. Workers run the company. There isn't any argument. So are you with them? Are you in? El Pueblo, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El Pueblo, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El Pueblo, you need them. Jamás será vencido. Jamás será vencido. Jamás será vencido. Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Imagine a minute, millions of average women and men in the tragic position of trading in passion for wages and cash they shackled by capitalism. Imagine a minute, millions of average citizens planting the spinach and waxing the kitchens and stacking the linens, contractors and renters and tenants, a labor extraction for pittance. What if they coordinated to address the sort of state of it in an organization? Cause fucking what? That's what organized labor does. And not even sort of, it's more of the crux. Taking the power from hoarders of bucks, big bankers offshore and they cuts. Returning the value of labor to those who created the billionaires owe it to us. So if you dated and tell me about waking up early to earn it back, if you sad about burning, if you got a curious turning and had it with passively lurking, we got your back and we happy to have you out on the picket line, actively working, going. Which side are you on? El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. El West side, you need them. Jamás será vencido. Which side are you on?
All right. So yeah, y'all make sure to get the word out on those two songs, on these winners, but also, I don't wonder, is there a way, well, I don't know if they're gonna share the other entries as well, but definitely get the word out on those two songs. So thank y'all again. What's up? Oh, right, so a lot of these are on YouTube, and there also was a link to them in the email sent out about the contest. So let's give one more round of applause for our winners. And I believe we now have a short break, and then there is a Zoom session at 3, there'll be a Zoom session at 3. So thank y'all again, and y'all have a wonderful day and a good rest of the time here in Atlanta.
Thank you.